Let's take a few minutes to review our answers for the Unit 7 study guide. You'll remember that we started Unit 7 with a review of government vocabulary concepts and the three basic forms of citizen participation, which of course are autocratic, oligarchic, and democratic. So, question one, describe the amount of citizen participation in each of these systems. Well, as you remember, in autocratic systems, they have no citizen participation. Oligarchic systems, very, very little. On the other hand, democratic systems have lots of citizen participation. In terms of freedom, well, freedom and citizen participation go hand in hand. So, the system that would have the most freedom, of course, that would be democratic systems. Systems with the least freedom, autocratic systems. Oligarchic systems not too far behind them on having the least freedom, but autocratic has the least. You'll remember that we reviewed parliamentary and presidential democracies because some of the countries in Africa use those systems. This question asks you to list two ways that presidential and parliamentary democracies are different. I'm going to give you four. You'll remember that in a parliamentary system, the leader is chosen by the legislature, not by the citizens directly. In a presidential system, the leader is elected by the citizens. In a parliamentary system, the leader is part of the legislature, as you can see in the icon. And in a presidential system, the leader and the entire executive branch has separate powers from the legislature. On to power distribution. The power distribution model that is centralized also known as concentrated, centralized in one national government is of course unitary. Now if you have a power distribution system where power is shared or divided between both national and regional levels, that's federal. And if you have a government where all the power is held out at the regional levels, that's a confederation. Now on to some specifics here with Kenya and South Africa. Now we remember that for all the countries that we study, we want to learn the 1, 2, 3, the basic citizen participation for that country, their specific form of government, and how power is distributed in that country. Now, Kenya and South Africa have a lot of similarities. For basic citizen participation, they're both democratic. The type of democratic country they are for number two is different, though. In Kenya, they have a presidential democracy where the president is elected separately from the legislature. On the other hand, South Africa follows a parliamentary system. The leader of their country is elected by the legislature. In the case of South Africa, the leader is elected by the National Assembly, not directly by the people. For power distribution, South Africa and Kenya are both medium to large size countries, and both of them use federal systems. Describe how much freedom people have in these countries. Well, in Kenya, they do have a certain amount of personal freedom. So they have some freedom, but with limits. There are limits in terms of freedom of speech in Kenya and freedom to criticize the government. South Africa, on the other hand, follows a pretty standard democratic model with lots of personal freedom. How do unstable governments make problems such as famine, HIV/AIDS, and civil wars worse? Well, unstable governments are not very well organized. They're not well organized, they're not very effective, so they have a lot of trouble dealing with serious problems like diseases and civil wars and famines. In addition to that, you often have corruption when you have unstable governments, and of course, government corruption can make it a lot harder for people from the outside to help because aid supplies will be stolen, money will be stolen, and so forth. Obstacles to education. There are four obstacles to education in Africa that we've studied. Four different things that keep people in Africa from getting the education that they want. One of those obstacles is not having enough school buildings or enough teachers to teach all the students who want to get educated there. In many cases, families are too poor to afford school fees, or to even afford to pay for basic supplies like pencils and books for their students. You also have many parts of Africa being affected by civil wars, and in many of these civil wars, child soldiers are being used. Obviously, if you're off fighting in a war, those children are not getting educated. And sadly, in some parts of Africa, there's a large amount of HIV/AIDS happening. And where you have a lot of HIV, you have a lot of parents and teachers who are sick and cannot work, and therefore the children are either not getting educated because they don't have teachers, or they're not getting educated because they have to stay home and take care of their siblings or help support the family rather than attend school. When a family can't send all their children to school, this is number 10, which children usually do not get to go? Well, when families are too poor to send children to school, if they can afford to send one or two, the ones that don't go, usually the girls. In many countries, girls do not get to go to school. Civil War in Sudan. Describe some of the factors that caused Sudan to spend many years in civil war. And some of these are the same sorts of factors we have that cause civil war in other countries in Africa. Sudan we were just using as a case study here. And you'll remember some of the same things that contribute to civil war in other places apply to Sudan. These are things such as artificial borders, ethnic and religious differences between North and South, and British favoritism towards some groups during colonialism. Remember that in Sudan, in the north, is predominantly Arab and Muslim, whereas in the south is predominantly black and either Christian or tribal animist. A lot of conflict because of those differences. What happened in 2011 to theoretically end the civil wars in Sudan, and did it work? Well, in 2011, the people in southern Sudan broke away and formed an independent country called South Sudan. This did end their war with the North, but unfortunately a new civil war has started in South Sudan. It started in November of 2013. Unfortunately, while the separation, the secession of South Sudan from the rest of Sudan did help end the war with the North, it did not mean an end to civil wars. Famine, malnutrition, and starvation. All right, to define famine, you'll remember that famine refers to a severe shortage of food affecting a large area and large numbers of people. And there are both human and natural causes for famine. Among the human causes of famine are wars and civil wars and refugee crises. When refugees have to flee, most often from a civil war, they of course are not bringing their food supply with them. Some natural causes of famine include such things as droughts, floods, and insect plagues, and many other natural causes as well. Unsafe drinking water. How can unsafe drinking water prevent children from attending school? Well, you have to remember that in many cases, children have to spend a lot of time during the day finding safe water for their families. If there is no safe water supply available near their home, then they might be walking for miles and miles. And it is very often the job of one of the family's children to do this, to spend the time walking miles and miles to the safe water supply to bring water back to their family. Obviously, if they're spending all day doing that, they're not at school getting an education. Also, by the way, getting diseases from unclean water very often will keep children at home sick. And if you're at home sick, obviously you're not in school. How does unsafe drinking water keep many African countries poor? Well, if your children aren't going to school, then they're not getting educated and they don't become productive workers. Likewise, if adults are sick a lot because of the waterborne diseases from unsafe drinking water, then they're not able to be at work contributing to the economy either. Now, good luck studying for the test. Don't forget that we have other videos to help refresh your memory on those government concepts. You should be able to find it here on this page or on our YouTube account.